Hello and welcome folks, Wizuko here! Genshin Impact is a game I tried my very best to stay away from. I knew I would like it. I knew I would spend more money on the game than I should. But what is a woman to do? This siren call in our dice, anime waifus, and husbandos. But most of all, Toma? How can a mere woman like me resist? Well, I couldn't. That's the story. On top of that, the game just has much more to offer than I originally thought. All the previous, very personal reasons aside, is Genshin a very well-designed game that makes exploring very exciting. And for all of us anime fans out there, the Asian inspirations that went into the game make it feel so vast, yet foreign. Exactly what we crave. Not all characters or regions are Asian history, folklore, or culturally inspired, of course, Mondstadt being the best example for a more European take. However, the Asian influence is still overshadowing the design of the game, and that is no critique at all. In fact, that's one of the things that made me fall in love with the game to begin with. After all, that's something that you can actually feel right from the get-go. The game starts with our traveler twins, both from another world, that get separated and search for each other. You play as the one you choose at the start, and that's a main story thread that is very important and leads your main quest for, so far, the entire game, making it the center of your emotional and personal journey as the other twin. Since the main story did not end yet, there are still a lot of open questions and puzzle pieces missing, but I want to share my speculations, even if they might turn out to be wrong. After all, I just couldn't help but be reminded of both Japanese folklore and a famous children's book well known in Japan. But is that a coincidence? After all, Genshin is a Chinese game. I decided to dig deeper into the history behind the twins of Genshin Impact. A little word of warning before we get into it. I try to leave out as many spoilers as possible, but it is impossible without any at all, so you have been warned. The Japanese creation myth and our Genshin twins. Twin myths, stories, and folklore are not limited by Japanese culture. We have Greek, Chinese, and many more twins in mythology that did the one or other magical thing, but my speciality is Japanese history, so that's what I'll go with. Stick with what you can sometimes, right? And even then, the Japanese mythology and folklore provides quite a few twin pairs, the most famous being Izanagi and his twin sister, but also bride, Izanami, who are held to be the creators of the Japanese archipelago, as well as the parents, so to speak, of many other deities, or kami as they are known in Japanese. One of their many children was the fire god Kagutsuchi, sometimes referred to as Homusubi, who burned his mother severely when he was born. Izanami was fatally wounded and burned. She died not long after the fire god was born. The dead are said to go to Yomi, an underworld not so unsimilar to the Hades, a land of darkness, impurity, and despair. Izanagi loved his sister wife and was grief-struck when she left, so he began to look for her and find a way to bring her back, only to find her in Yomi in a horrible state. She already ate food from Yomi, so she wasn't allowed to leave anyway, and as a result of that, she was rotting and covered in maggots when he found her. She begged him not to look at her, but Izanagi just couldn't resist. Shocked by her new looks, he ran away from her, while she, on the other hand, kinda understandably, went crazy over her anger and cursed the man that she had loved so far. A tragic story that, in more detail, serves as the origin story of many kami, as Izanagi and Izanami gave birth to the most important gods in Japanese Shintoism. On first glance, you might not see the connection between the Japanese creation myth and Genshin Impact. And yeah, I sure hope Aether and Lumine are not in love, at least not romantically, and they don't seem to be the creators of the world in Genshin. And the twin you search for certainly didn't die. Yet, at least. But I do see other similarities that could have been the inspiration for the tragic story of our beloved twins. So let's connect some dots. For one, what both Lumine and Aether and Izanagi and Izanami have in common is that they are both twins from another world, visiting this world, changing it, and in the process become inseparable to the gods of this new world that they have created, or rather found. They themselves being both some sort of godlike creatures, but also not really from here. Our journey in Genshin Impact 2 forces us to get to know the gods and discover our very own great power that, in a way, can even challenge that of a god.
You really do have some wonderful abilities.
Another similarity is the tragic separation of the twins. Both pairs only had each other really, but then due to a tragedy, and be it a faithful death or a tragic fight with a lady whose hair did remind me of a white flame, but maybe I just really wanted to see that. Now separated, one of the twins awoke sooner than the other and began their journey first. The Spiral Abyss, a fallen civilization that is now corrupted, both sounds and looks to me like a land of the living roaming the lands. Not quite dead, not quite alive, are the mindless monsters now the faithful soldiers behind our evil twin. And yeah, that's not quite the same as being a rotten corpse trapped in the underworld now, forever dead, but you can't deny that it's not a far stretch from one story to the other, from the one twin being captured in Yomi and the other twin being captured in a Spiral of Abyss. We don't know for sure yet if our twin is being deceived and might not know why they do what they do. Their true motives are still a mystery after all. Yet, being separated by dead and impure beings, tearing the twins apart, a tragic fall of one of them, these are the plot points that we have in both storylines. Also, in both stories, we have a similar relationship development. The inseparable twins at the start love each other and really, they seem to have only each other to hold on to, who, by an event outside of their power, got separated and now realize that they have become strangers to each other in a way, even though they loved each other so much before.
We will be reunited, dear brother, but not here, not now. We will meet at this journey's end.
If my theory holds true, I am very curious to see what that might imply for our twins. I don't see MiHoYo add an incest story into the main story, and I don't think it'll turn out that our twins made or created this world, but it does imply our twins belong to an ancient godlike species and are far more powerful than anything we have seen so far. And for that, I'd definitely be super excited. Aether and Lumine, design and lore. When you start the game, you can enter a name you want for the twin that you choose. But regardless of what creative name you picked for your character, the game addresses the male twin as Aether and the female one as Lumine, as these are their common names. Quite a ring they got to them, right? Beautiful names, aren't they? But also very similar. Yeah, actually, yeah. Lumine comes from illuminate, and that makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Her bright, white design and looks really make her stand out. Even the Chinese kanji used for her character, pronounced ying, means glimmering or fluorescent. So yeah, illuminating, isn't it? Aether, on the other hand, most likely comes from the Greek mythology. Aether is a character from Greek mythology with twisted origins. There are different contradicting stories about his family tree, but one thing is for sure. He represents the sky, and looking at the original name, again Chinese, and pronounced Kong, the Chinese kanji also circles back to the theme of air or sky. For me, that was a harder connection to make, and I always felt Aether had something more dark to his design than his sister, which, by the way, is exactly why I always felt like he was more fit to be the, in quotes, evil twin, design-wise at least. But then again, looks are deceiving, aren't they? What I noticed right away when I first saw the two was the shapes of the ornaments they both wear on their outfits. They reminded me of stars. And after getting a little more into the game, it did make a lot of sense to me. Stars, or more precisely, the wishing on stars, is a core mechanic to the game and gives stars meaning beyond just being pretty. For me at least, that made the twins and stars inseparable, making them star twins to me. And that also might ring a bell or two on your end, if you were a Japan fan yourself. Because the concept of star twins is an old story in Japan. You probably already saw so many adaptations of that concept that stars and twins have something in common by default to you by now. And there is a good reason why that is. The Futago no Hoshi, literally twin stars, a story written by Miyazawa Kenji and later added onto the story of his book Night of the Milky Way Railroad in 1934. It is well known and adapted in one way or the other in all sorts of Japanese media. Most famously, it is referenced in many Ghibli movies. For good reason, the poetry and storytelling are stunning. I can't understand why it is so difficult to get your hands on any translations of his works. But I did manage to find some open sources for you to check out. Links are, as always, in the description if you want to check it out for yourselves. To summarize what happens in the story in short, you have a pair of twins, boy and girl. They both lived among the stars until they started a journey from the stars that would look like the Scorpio over to the wings of an eagle, always referring to existing star constellations. They lost their way and tried to find home again. And on their way, they meet kings, visit different kingdoms, and each one with their own moral code. I make this summary very short because the story of the twin stars in the Futago no Hoshi saga isn't a very long one to begin with, and in many adaptations, left out even, which makes it hard to follow the storyline, to be honest. However, the inspirations and the influences are still clear, I think. Twins that come from the stars on a journey across worlds. Also, a very familiar sounding story worth comparing to Genshin, isn't it? Because in Genshin also, we are traveling across different kingdoms, each with their own moral code, each representing a different element, and each led in a different way and living in different ways of life. The main difference here being that our twins are separated. We are on this journey, in quotes, alone. I mean, we do have our companions, but we don't have our twin with us. And looking for a twin is the main thing that drives us. Rules and ways of living and their star designs makes me wonder if all this is really just a coincidence, or maybe it's a reference to one of the most tragic yet best fantasy authors of modern Japan, Miyazawa Kenji.
つまり、お前たちは世界の外から漂流してきたのか? お前たちがそこから離れて次の世界へ行こうとしたとき、見たこともない神がお前たちの前に現れたと。
よそ者、お前たちの旅はここまでだ。
Japan and twins. And to stick to Miyazawa Kenji a little bit longer, it is believed that it is no coincidence that he picked twins for his story either. For a long time, having twins in Japan was considered bad luck. It was believed to be a bad omen for the family, and in some cases even for the world, when twins were born. They were seen as an sort of unbalance to the world, and for a long time it was custom to kill or give one child up for adoption when twins are born. Especially a male-female twin pair was bad, like really bad. Not only, but mostly because it was believed that the twins were having coitus in their mother's belly while still unborn. So a twin like that could not have been born pure. Historically, that belief might stem from the fact that a woman pregnant with twins had a higher risk to die during or after labor. We are talking dark ages after all. Also, a possible origin for that belief could simply be because it's not the norm and everything that is not usual is automatically scary. Whatever it was that provoked that thought, Japanese people held on to this belief for quite a long time, until after the war and due to westernization and also thanks to writers like Miyazawa, the belief slowly started to weaken. It still does give food for thought though, doesn't it? The twins arrive in the world of Genshin right when a huge disaster was about to happen, each time. And after the first one awakens, an entire civilization gets annihilated. And when the second one wakes up, it seems that tragedy strikes wherever they set foot. On the one hand, I'd argue that to have an adventure hero story, the story's kinda gotta progress in that way. But on the other hand, I also can't help but wonder if the twins themselves are not maybe a bad omen to the world of Genshin, but no one yet realizes that?
An argument against that theory is that actually in Chinese, a so-called phoenix twin pair, a boy and a girl, are actually a sign of good luck. But does that mean that the inspiration needs to be drawn from China? Or could this be a hint that it's actually inspiration taken from Japan?
I guess the story just has to continue for us to know for certainty.
When one's fervent ambition burns brightly, the gods will cast their gaze upon you.
Outro. And I can't wait for the story to do so. Genshin has a wonderful world and the amount of Asian lore that you can find in it is amazing. I want to note that I am of course aware that Genshin might look like your Japanese RPG, but it is actually Chinese, which in no way is the same. So maybe there are more obvious Chinese inspirations I'm missing. On the other hand, being Chinese doesn't mean that you can't pull inspirations from another country, especially not if that country is right next to you. And there are in fact a lot of similarities in Chinese and Japanese folklore and mythology. If you know more about Chinese folklore and myths, I would love to hear if you've anything to add on to my points. And even if not, I would love to hear what you think of all this. So let me know in the comments down below, and I hope to see you next time. Until then, have it good. Bye!